Okay, so I just sort of wanted to go over the 7 mountains of influence in case you don't have them memorized, and then I have a couple of questions. So they were church, family, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business. So which of these areas would you say you're most interested in?
Family.
Okay. Which are you the most influenced by?
Family. Media.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm here to talk to you today about arts and entertainment and how we as believers can influence the world through that, but also how it influences us. So, as Karen said, I'm a music teacher. I do voice and piano, and I spend a lot of my years doing music therapy. And so, for those who may not know what music therapy is, it's utilizing music as a tool for therapeutic purposes. So, I worked with children with autism and children who may have had tracheotomies or different things like that, and you're working on getting breath support, so you use instruments in order to get them to build their lung capacity and things like that. So there's measurable results in what you're doing, and you're using music as the tool to facilitate the goals that you're looking for. Also used with dementia patients. So a common thing in that arena is for them to have behaviors that continue at what we would call a perseveration. It just keeps happening and happening. They may get stuck on a word where they say it again and again, or have a physical action that they do again and again. And so that was what my senior research was on, was how can music cause a stop to those things. And so just so you have kind of an understanding of where I'm coming from, I'm not coming from just a feel good, I love music kind of thing, but there's a lot of scientific stuff about what music does for us with our brains, our bodies, and how it's a multi-tooled thing. So sometimes we can put music just in a category of a leisure, pleasure kind of thing, but it's much more influential than that. So music is found in every known culture, in past and present. Music has an amazing ability to affect our moods. Can anybody attest to that? Yeah. So you listen to something upbeat and you find yourself being kind of energized by it. Sometimes it can even draw you out of a place of lowered mood affect. What about the converse? Like if you listen to something that's slow and maybe slightly depressing, what happens there for you personally? Sleepy, sad, yeah. Have you ever found that music could express something that you can't express yourself? Yeah, so sometimes sad music can help us have sort of a cathartic experience. So things that we can't express into words, we can either participate in music, write our own music, whatever, and we have sort of a healing effect. Okay, it can change. And so lots of the Psalms and Lamentations are that very thing of people crying out to God and saying, and they have no words, but they're kind of singing, speaking, poetry type things to get out those things that they aren't able to communicate otherwise. So there's a lot of research with music in the brain. I'm just going to give you some snippets of it because I just think it's important to understand. So research has found that listening to music stimulates multiple parts of the brain. So like most activities we do encompass a single lobe of the brain or two, but music fires the entire brain. So every portion is highlighted by different aspects of music. So for instance, scientists discovered that part of the brain that processes musical pulse, which is the beat, the tempo, is also responsible for motor function. So when you hear something that has a good beat, your body wants to respond, right? You don't just sit there. Very few of us sit there with a great beat going and just like, yep, that's music. We're moving in some way. And so that leads into another realm of how music and movement, dance, that type of thing incorporate. It's a natural combination. So the areas of the brain that process rhythm and tonality are the same that are associated with emotions. So just like we talked about, upbeat, fast inspires us, gives us energy, slow can tend to either create sadness or kind of be a healing type thing. Then the part of the brain that processes timbre, does anybody know what timbre is? Okay, you get a music lesson. So timbre is the quality of the sound. So if you heard a flute and then you heard a violin, then you heard a person sing, those all have different timbres to them. So there's a different quality to the sound. Some of them are bright, some are dark, some can be harsh. So they all have a different sound that we process. So that is linked to creativity and the portions of our brain that are wandering. Okay, so you can kind of see how that would correlate, that there's a whole wide range of timbre if you think of all the instruments of the orchestra and how each individual's person's voice would sound different, that would link to the part of the brain that would be creative, that would inspire us to have creative and imaginative thoughts. So, go ahead. Oh, absolutely.
Is that why people say
There's mixed reviews about that, but there is some correlation between the structure of music and our brains, and how people who study music and participate in music have a higher level of functioning with certain motor and math skills. They're kind of all encompassing. It's not definitive. I mean, because when you do statistics, you have to have certain quotients and boundaries in order to say that it's statistically proven, but there is a lot of correlation between those things, that people draw the parallels, but to say absolutely this is 100% proven is still a little on the fence. But I'm sure in some point we'll get more and more research and more understanding of that question. So listening to music can change the chemicals in our brain. Okay, so there's a neurotransmitter in our brain called dopamine. Has anybody ever heard of dopamine? Some people say that when you eat chocolate, it releases dopamine in your brain.
Yeah. So when you stimulate the brain through music, are there any physical benefits? Like, is it healthy? Like, does it?
Yeah. Yes, it does. So it releases dopamine, which is that natural, oh, I feel good. Like you've almost like endorphins when you exercise. So it's that same kind of thing. And so that's just listening to music. But when you actively participate in music, it releases another chemical, oxytocin, which creates trust and bond. So that's why you see a lot of people who come together in a choir, come together in a band, rock, otherwise, orchestra, those kind of groups, that they're very close in relationship. They also fight a lot, but that there's that type of bonding that happens when you're creating this together. And so they have studied and found that actual chemicals are released when just listening and also when participating. So music stimulates the same parts of the brain that control motor function, process emotions, and keep us creative and focused. Listening to music produces chemicals in the brain that motivate us, make us feel good, and help us to trust and bond with others. So our bodies and brains are made to respond to music. Have you ever watched a movie that was either intended to be silent or you turned down the volume? Have you ever done that? Did you feel drawn into the movie, or could you easily just be distracted and do other things? What was your response?
I watched it, and it was like I could easily just look away and like do something else because there was nothing
Yeah. Anybody else?
No one
anymore.
Like they barely even did back then. Like they always had orchestra playing.
Yes, and that was one of the components that was so interesting in that time, is because you had this video, this reel that was played, and you had live musicians interpreting what was happening. So you had that in the moment thing. So there's a whole lot of research about live versus canned music. I won't go into that, but there's a lot more connection to having a live experience versus just putting on a CD and listening to it, versus being there and actually hearing the waves of music and how our bodies respond to that. So, how does that relate to God? How does God fit into this equation? Well, I would submit that God made us to worship. Abraham, when he's taking Isaac to be sacrificed, tells the people, all the men with him, "You stay here, my son and I are going to go worship the Lord." Now, is worship always praise and worship? I'll leave that for you to decide. Moses and Miriam, when they cross the Red Sea, the first thing they do, praising God, worshiping the Lord for all that he had done, taking them from Egypt, crossing. David, when the ark returns, praising, worshiping the Lord through dance. One would assume there would be music. And then Mary, when she's carrying Jesus, worships the Lord. Oh, my soul magnifies the Lord, bursts into what we would assume would be song. So God desires us to worship him, and we find that in Deuteronomy 6, and it's also re-paraphrased in Matthew 4:10. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. And then Psalm 29:2, ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name, worship the Lord in splendor of holiness. So if you're listening to music, can release chemicals in your brain, and you're actively participating in music, releases chemicals, what do you think worship would do? Would it not create that same thing and more? Do you think it's a coincidence that God created us in this way to have a response to music and to worship? Why? Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's healing. I mean, it's we we're able to enter in wherever we are and have a physical change through something, and we're able to bond and trust and all of those things that we desire and he desires for us. And I find it amazing that there's that much research that for centuries and centuries people have been worshiping whatever it is, God, hopefully, but not always. And we have these responses, and he knew the science behind it, and we're just now seeing the science of what we're able to, put on these electrodes on and see what the brain, how it responds, and all of these things. But God knew it from the beginning that this was something that was important for us. He wired us to be this way. So do you think that it's important what kind of art and entertainment you partake in? Why? Yeah, that is one thing, what you're drawn to. Should you would want to participate in those things. What about the content? Does that matter?
So like if you listen to like upbeat music, you don't feel happier if you listen to some music. So depending on what you're listening to, watching it,
Yeah. Okay. So, do you think that lyrics to songs, whether they're understood or not, influence you? Yeah. I mean, have you ever gone to a mall and all of a sudden you're saying all the words to the song? You're like, I didn't even know I knew that song. Yeah. So, how do we make choices about what we're engaging in? Because how many of you plan to be a professional musician, dancer, artist? Like, is that your career path? Yeah. So, how do we, not being professionals in this, knowing that we're probably not going to engage the culture at large, we're not going to be going out as Christians into the world to do this as a profession, how do we influence the culture by what we do on a personal level? How do our choices influence those around us?
We could teach our kids, if we have kids, we can teach them to fill their minds with good things, and good entertainment.
Okay. Does that mean only listening to 104.7 The Fish and only renting Christian movies?
No.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
So how do we go through? What kind of filters do we have? What boundaries do we set for ourselves for arts and entertainment? How do we know whether we should or shouldn't listen to something or go see that film or be at that concert or buy that book?
It's relative to each person. Like for me, if I'm watching something and it's been referenced a bit much, which doesn't often happen, I will turn it off. But it might be different for me than it is for other people because I watch movies and listen to music analytically rather than just taking the content at face value. Like if there's a bunch of violence or dark content in the movie, I'll be looking at why or how well it was done rather than just focusing on the content itself.
Mm-hmm.
Other people might just look at the content and be like, "Oh, that's shocking. That's going to affect my brain." So it's different for.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it also really matters on your reactions to them. So people are going to be watching you since this is a Christian. On how do they respond to listening to this or watching this on TV? So I guess you're going to watch out for that, and so people are going to be watching us and determining: are we going to turn away from that? Are we going to let this affect us in any way, or are we going to be able to see a light in it? Or
Do you think we build a tolerance for things? Yes. So how do we protect that? How do we keep from saying, okay, this is my boundary? Oh, well, I mean, I saw that and I don't think it really affected me. So the next time my boundary is here. Well, that didn't really affect me. I don't feel emotionally changed by that or defiled or whatever. Now my boundary is here. How do we keep our boundary in a place that's healthy and not keep extending it out to bring in more and more of what may not be healthy?
If you expand your boundary too fast when you're too young or too impressionable, then it'll have negative effects. But if you are able to not have them, not have that content impact you negatively, but also not have you be numb to it in the real world, then I think at that point it's probably safe to extend your boundaries there in entertainment. If you're able to watch things like that and still feel emotion when that happens in real life. And there's not really any way to tell
is hard to say. It's hard to do. Do any of you have filters already in place?
You mean how we speak or
What you allow in for yourself? I mean, I would imagine most of your parents have filters for you, but then do you have your own filter? Because I mean, I think that's where, speaking of a parent, but I have a 6 year or 7 year old, that's my oldest. My desire is that they would put in place that filter, that I have the filter that I want for them, but I would want them to choose that or even more stringent than my filter for them. So, do any of you take a self imposed filter?
there are some things I won't watch based on content. Like if it gets like too extreme for really no reason, like there's a film called Serbian film that I haven't probably will never watch because it's just explicit in every way imaginable. And from what I've read, it's for no reason. Like there's no artistic thing behind it. They're just trying to shock. Like I won't watch that. I won't watch any of the Human Centipede because it's just garbage for the sake of being garbage.
So, how do you determine that ahead of time? Do you have a website you go to that you trust their judgment for that, or do you have people? Or
I check reviews,
Mhm.
certainly like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. I also check out the filmmaker, if they have a good track record, like if they try to convey a message, whether or not it came along. Like there are some people you can count on, whether or not the movie is good, they at least try. But there are some people who will put shocking content in there just to be shocking, and then frankly, it just gets boring if that happens. Like it's not even shocking at that point; it's just not fun to watch.
Does anybody else have filters as far as music or anything like that?
You know, just as a Christian, certain things just rub me wrong. Like I feel like maybe it even pops up, just like he was sharing. It's shocking. Like, whoa, I don't want to get into this. This is probably going to go downhill. So as a Christian, I can just feel this very negative sort of feeling, like I shouldn't be watching this. So I guess that's the Holy Spirit talking. So just watch it, just making sure that that uncomfortable feeling stays, I guess, is important and it protects you.
Mm-hmm.
Like being uncomfortable and shocked by movies and stuff is fine as long as it's making you think about this stuff. Like I'm watching a Netflix series called Black Mirror, and it's kind of disturbing and makes you think about like what if media goes too far and what if everyone starts relying on it in a realistic, like impactful way. And it's making me think about like how that'll happen and like how we could probably prevent it. And it got me to do that by disturbing me. So disturbing content can be used in a positive way, but it's very difficult to do and often ends up poorly.
Mm. I have another question. Do you think God's design for music, worship, visual arts can be counterfeit? Do you think that the pure form of something could have another alongside that would be almost impossible to identify between, but one would be fulfilling and uplifting, and one would leave you wanting and maybe even a slippery slope toward things of an occult nature or drawing you away from your faith?
I mean, even music can become an idol and, in itself. draw you away from God, even though it's meant to be a form of worship. It can still draw you away from Him.
So what would that look like or sound like to you? What have you seen something like that? I'm not saying that you actively participate in it, but are there things that you are aware of that you say, I'm not even going to go there. That's not real. That's not, and you don't have to name specific things. I'm just wondering if that is even something that you're aware of for yourself, that there are things that are non-Christian that are good, that are uplifting and good. They're not just because it doesn't have, it was done by this Christian company, or there were 50 Christians in this movie. I mean, there are movies that you can go and see and the message is great and it had nothing, it wasn't released in that vein or that avenue. But then there are things that are released that can look like a real thing, but they're not, and they have twists on truth and that. So are there things that you've seen, heard, read about, whatever, that you say, oh, that doesn't ring true? And how do you keep yourself from engaging in that?
This actually kind of happens in a lot of Christian movies, like God's Not Dead movies. I find especially atrocious. The first, both of them really, they paint anyone who doesn't believe in God as like an awful person inherently, just because they're not believers, which is stupid. There are plenty of good people that don't believe in God, and
Like
yeah,
first
as,
one,
as
like,
well, yeah.
all Muslims.
There was the first one. It painted Muslims as like really awful people. Like the dad, like just slapped his daughter because she was listening to a sermon or something. Which, by the way, bit of a tangent. She left her iPod face up and on, like not even locked, like so anyone could walk in and see exactly what she was listening to. Like it wasn't even. It was like she wasn't even trying to keep it secret. But anyway, it paints everyone who isn't a believer as inherently evil, which is, first off, it's not healthy to believe that, and also it doesn't allow for any kind of dialogue to be open. Like, why are Christians right? It just like takes it at face value and like, oh, Christians are right. We're not going to go any deeper than that. Everyone else is wrong because I said so.
Or if you are like trying to sell Christianity, if you don't think this one at the concert I went to, this guy was like, everyone who's a Christian, stand up, and if you don't stand up, then you're going to hell or something along those lines. And I didn't stand up because I'm not buying Christianity. I'm not going to be pushed into a guilt trip of standing up, and probably a lot of the people there were Christians.
It's like those Facebook posts. This girl, even though she has violent disfigurations, we can believe that she is beautiful. If you don't share this, you are the devil.
Yeah.
So there's
now I'm
extremism.
just not going to share it. Get out of my house.
Well, I'll close my portion, and I don't know how much more discussion you'll do about this, but music, media, arts influence us. They always have, and they always will. They'll be a part of our lives, just like food that we put in our bodies. We listen and watch what it matters, what we're feeding our minds and our hearts. So let us not settle for a counterfeit, but have true enjoyment of what God created. We should engage in arts and entertainment that honors God and that's created us to be created.
Thank you, Mamie. But before you leave, I do want to open it up to other questions because we have time. Okay. Yeah. So throw them out there. This is a great opportunity to Anything that's stirring.
If the like music isn't like sounds and like sad and depressing, but the lyrics are happy, do you think the lyrics are like the still more important?
It depends on how you're wired. I mean, some of us are more drawn to language, and some of us are more wired for just sound, and text impacts the brain in a different way than music does. But music alongside text has a larger purview, for lack of a better word. It has a bigger impact. So I just personally try to stay away from things that lead me down a path that I don't want to be on. I listen to lots of things. I'm not just in Christian music, but even songs that, if they're not, if you listen to it and you're like, oh, you know, talking about people and the way they move and their behind and, different things like that, well, does that glorify God? But saying, I love this person and they they bring something to me. Well, I think God designed us to be in relationship with others. So, there it's a very hard line. I say those things more just so that we're aware, because it's such a slippery slope to go down, and music is so engaging and draws us in, and the message that goes along with it can be positive or it can be negative, but you can get hooked on a style of music that's just filling you with darkness, but it gives you a response in your inner self that you desire, you need, you're drawn to. And so I only say that just to look at the lyrics, just see, because you may say, oh, I don't even know what they are, but somewhere in you knows what they are. And so that paired with the music creates a perfect storm for things, and things float up in your mind, thoughts, that may be inspired by that we just want to guard and protect as much as we can. I mean, I by no means say only listen to Christian music, because I think God created us to enjoy things outside of worship to Him as well. I mean, and there are human relationships that can be cast in music that are healthy and good, and nature and noticing things that He's created outside of that perfect worship relationship. So I don't discourage anyone. I just say, just be conscientious about what you're allowing in, because it's surprising how quickly it can go in the other direction from personal experience.
Any other questions, comments?
I I've listened to like songs based on scary things,
Mm-hmm.
and I listen to the lyrics like more every time I listen, and it kind of like creeps me out.
Mm-hmm.
I get scared by the things
Mm-hmm.
in the song. And do you think that that kind of music is like what do you think? Should I stop listening to that music?
I can't tell you what to do, but if it were me and I was afraid, that to me is a thing that would say, maybe I shouldn't do this. But there may be a genre that is similar that would have uplifting lyrics. So if it really is like a style of music that you enjoy, but the text is inappropriate or uncomfortable, there may be other places that you can find a similar thing, if that's what's drawing you. Is I really like the way alternative rock sounds. There are alternative rock songs that aren't scary or have inappropriate things to it. So just finding with guidance, what could fill that for you without infiltrating your border of what makes you comfortable or uncomfortable. It's challenging. See, just a little bit gets us hooked, and then we want more of it. But that's wise of you to notice that in yourself. And I would encourage you to take action on that response.
All right. Well, thank you so much,
yeah,
Amy.
yeah.
It was a real treat to have you here.
Thank